So this week, we're focusing on the brain. Along with that, we'll look at some of the tracks that go from the brain down to controlling motor functions. So that's part of what the previous chapter. I'll refer to that as we get there. So this is going to be kind of motor control will be one theme that we'll get to. Before that, we're going to talk about some basics of the brain. So if you remember, the central nervous system is the brain and the spinal cord. So brain plus spinal cord, that's our central nervous system. Spinal. This whole kind of midline right here. Last week, we talked about the spinal cord itself, as well as the peripheral nerves, which are bundles of axons that arise from the spinal cord. The other component that's not here that we talked about last week are collections of ganglia, which are in large regions where there are cell bodies, so neural cell bodies, right? This is the nervous system, in the PNS. Groups of cell bodies in the brain. Anyone know what these are called? These are called nuclei. I did not come up with this name. Nuclei are collections of cell bodies in the central nervous system. So these brain nuclei contain multiple cells. Each of these cells contains a nucleus. So this whole thing would be a brain nucleus. Nucleus is singular of nuclei. And this right here would be a cell nucleus. It's just the same name. The other thing we need to consider inside the brain is how these different nuclei are connected. So we might have a cerebellum here that has certain nuclei in it, collections of cell bodies that need to connect to somewhere up here in the cerebrum. This connection point is called a tract. This is groups of axons in the CNS. So similar to a peripheral nerve, but it's in the central nervous system. Tracts are made up of white matter. So we'll see we can see this in the brain. We'll look at this and we'll see white and gray components. This is going to be gray matter, just like we had in the spinal cord, the gray horn. And this is going to be white matter because these are mostly myelinated axons. In the central nervous system, we're going to have integration occur, processing. Sometimes it can be very simple. Sometimes it can be more complex. Typically, brain processing is more complex than what we saw in the spinal cord. Remember our simplest integration that occurs in the spinal cord? It's barely even integration. We had a reflex where there's a monosynaptic input to cause a kick, contraction of the quadricep muscles. What happens in the central nervous system of the brain is going to be a bit more complex than that. And when we talk about motor control regulated by the central nervous system, it's going to involve planning opposed to just a reflex kick. This is not a semester in neuroanatomy, so we're not going to go into tons of detail on everything, every single brain region. You could take a whole semester or a year in neuroanatomy in the future. We'll also overlap someone's anatomy in lab, so some of the different brain regions we'll see. So we'll start with what protects the central nervous system, the meninges, the blood-brain barrier, the cerebrospinal fluid. Then we'll go into a bit of the regions of the brain and a bit of the subregions that make each of those up. And then we'll go into the tracks going from brain down to the spinal cord to control motor functions.